Hi guys, thank you for attending. We're just waiting for a couple of more people before we start, so should we just give it 5 minutes more and then we should start. Thank you very much. Hey guys, I think we can start for the guys that's on it. So people that missed out, they can always catch up with the recording afterward. So thank you very much for attending the webinar. The webinar is based on Inventor Content Center. So creating custom content center. This is just part one of it. We've got another session on creating content center for frame generator coming up. So please look out for that. If there's any questions, there's a questions tab at the bottom. You can type in your question in there. Alternatively, you could raise your hand. At the end of it, we can get involved and get into the questions when we answer your questions. So for now, to start off, just a quick introduction on the webinar and what we're covering. So the agenda looks as follows. So we look at the introduction of Content Center and introduction of the webinar itself. We look at the Inventor Content Center, the content library configuration. So it's a Content Center library configuration inside of Inventor. Then we'll jump into a demo on showing you how to actually create this Content Center. And then we've got questions and answers afterward. Right. So without further ado, let's carry on. So in summary, in this webinar, we look at the steps required to create your very own custom content center inside of Inventor Professional 2019. So this can be done in, of course, Inventor 2017 or 2018 as well, and previous versions as well back. Also, how to manage this content libraries, where these content libraries live, and also we look at various options with regards to converting iParts into content centers. So what we'll do is the workflow would be creating a part, moving it, creating an iPart out of that, and then also publishing that to the content center. And also looking at the locations of where the content center is and what file formats it outputs. Okay, so the file format is not the standard, although you're working off a standard IPT, the file format is not going to be the standard IPT. It's gonna change. Right? So we'll have a look at that as well. Okay, so let's run through this. Okay, so at the end of the class, you would be able to learn workflows used to create custom content center in Inventor. So custom libraries. Okay, Also, you learn how iParts are created, and when we use iParts, how we create Content Center out of that. And at the end of it, you should be able to, using these workflows, create your own custom Content Center. Now, it's very elementary. We're just giving the basics on it. So there's much more you can do with Content Center, much more customizations you can do it. But for the course, for the purpose of this class, we're going to look at doing Content Center from just standards. And of course, the next class we'll look at doing Content Center for your frames and frame generator. Okay, so Inventor Content Center, if we look at it, you find that it's a little screen that you see up here directly out of Inventor assembly environment, where you have the option to choose different standards. And under those standards, you can pick up the different components that's inside of the Content Center itself. So it could be nuts, bolts, pins, depending on which environment that you're looking content for. It could be shaft parts, structural parts, tube and pipe, all of those things that live inside of in the Content Center. Now, an introduction to the Content Center for the guys that do not know about it, you find that when you install Inventor, the Content Center libraries gets installed as well. So there's an option to actually select which libraries you want. Alternatively, if you do not install it, you can go back and install it or download them and install them for Inventor. If you're using Vault for data management, you could have your Content Center live on the Vault, and every time you're working off it, you can access the Content Center from there. However, if we look at some of the tools and functions inside of it, the Content Center has a really nice function, which is called the auto drop. And what this allows us to do, it allows us to actually select, for instance, if it's a bolt that we're going to add into a specific hole. If we use the auto drop function, if we hover our mouse over it, the size is automatically updated to the size of the hole. And also, there's also iMates that it works off, and you can also adjust the placements and stuff like that with it. So to start off, where does this Content Center live, or where does this Content Center work, and how do you configure them? So inside of the Inventor project file, you find that there's a Configure Content Center Libraries dialog box. And inside of here, if you click on the Configure dialog box, you get the page that opens up that shows you the Content Center that's available to you and what's not available. Now, you'll notice that some of them are in red. That means it's not available for selection, or I cannot use it. It's either because it's not loaded, or it's not available inside of the folder that the Content Center works off. Now, just above that, you'll find that the location of the libraries, you see it's on, by default, it sits on your C drive, in your program data files, the version of Inventor, Content Center, and libraries. Now, that's something we're going to look at now as well, as we start off, jump onto the demo. So in here, this is the file that I'm going to be working off. Now, there's a couple of things I'm going to do to this file and work with it. So just to be clear, can everyone see the screen that's on it here? Yes, okay. So with regards to the Content Center, if I go into the Projects tab, under my project that's selected, below that, I've got, if it's a read-only file, you'll find that you've got a workspace here and you've got folder options. And below that, it should show you the location of the Content Center for that specific project that you're working on. Now, for the guys that are using data management tool like Vault, that will be different, because your Content Center, on your project file will be configured for Vault. In this example, we're looking at just a single user project file. If I look at the Configure Content Center folder, dialog box on the right-hand side, if I click on it, it opens up the Configure Libraries location for where the Content Center is pulling from Inventor. So if I look at this, on the top here, you see a little link. And if I click on that link, it takes me to that location of the file. Now, what's interesting about this is that we've got files that are standard, which you see in here, okay? We've also got some files that are custom, like the SA Steel section standards, SA Steel standards, and also the steel sections. So these are files that I've created for my content center, so I could have the South African version of the steel standards, which we get out of the book when we're doing designs. Now, often you find that it does not come with it, and this is one of the things that a lot of people request as well. So if you ever need this in future, please pop me an email afterward, and I'll be able to send this to you. Okay. So with regards to that, if we look at the file format, the type of it, notice that it's an IDCL file. Now, the IDCL file, it's an Inventor Content Centre file, so it's very different to an IPT or an IAM. And this is a published file, so all of our IPTs and IAM would reside in these files. Now, this can be moved out or configured to different areas that we're going to work off. Okay, so if it's mapped to the right area, it will pull out from that area. If it's not mapped to it, you might find your content center not being available. So that's something to look out for. Below here, you can create a new library. So the process of me creating a library here, I went in and just created a library from here. You punch in the library details and the file name, and what it does is it creates a library file for you for where you're going to publish your parts to. If you're using Inventor 2017 or 2018, and perhaps you need to migrate or you upgrade your Inventor to 2019, and your custom content center is still on the older version of Inventor because that's what you used previously, you could come in and do an update tool, and what this does is it updates your content center for the latest release that you're working off. If this is not done, you might be prompted that your library is out of date and needs a migration. So that's something else to look at and consider as well. Libraries can be deleted from here and all of those things. Now notice, if I've got the in use column, and if I uncheck specific libraries from here, when I go in to look for the library or when I go into place from Content Center, I'm not going to have access to that. Reason for that is because it is unchecked on the left-hand side. Okay, so let's start into it. Let's get into it. So if I look at what I have in here, so first we're going to go in and look at the component that I have. Now it's a very standard component. As you can see, it's one extrusion with a hole. And if you look at it, what I'm going to do is, firstly, I need to create this into an iPart. And from that iPart, I'm going to go in and publish it to my content center. So very easy to do that. Before we do this, let's look at the sketch that's in here. Okay, I'll go into edit sketch. I'm able to actually look at what's driving my sketch. Now, if I go into the parameters dialog box, I can actually pick up and see that I've got some name parameters in here, and these name parameters become very useful when I'm creating an iPart. Okay, so let's start off creating an iPart. So under manage, we can go in and create iPart, and notice that the extrusions here and the holes there, so that make up the features of my part. I've got some name parameters in here that I can work off and call in, and it makes life a lot easier when I'm doing an iPart if I'm naming my parameters, because I can always go down and see what's going on in here. All right, so all I do is go in, insert a couple of rows, and from here I can go in and do some changes that I need. So in this example, we want to actually be able to move out or change the size of the slider, not width-wise, but more on the length side of it. So under the length column, I'm going to go in and make the first one 15, and the second one, we'll make that 20. Okay, that. Notice that on the browser, I've got a little table that's populated. Now, if I look at the table that's been populated, I see that there's three different options that I have. So the name of it is BB slider. The first one is 01, the second one is 02, and the third one is 03, naturally. If I click on 02, notice that the option of changing the length of it has changed. If I go to 3, it's also changed. Now I can look at each different extrusion in more detail to see how it's been extruded from and from where. You notice that it's being extruded from the center. If I go into the next option, I can also see that it's also being extruded from the center as well. Okay, so symmetric extrusion. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to have option 3, the whole, to be more centralized, and this can be easily done from our parameters dialog box. And what I can do is I named it the whole distance when I put the hole in, and all I can do is just on my parameters dialog box select that, list the parameters. It's going to be the length divided by 2, and I OK that. Now what happens is the length of the center of the distance to the edge was 5 millimeters for the hole, and all I did was I said the whole edge distance would now need to be the length of the component divided by 2 for BB slider 03. If I go to 01, it gives me a message that it's been updated. I say yes. If I go to 01, naturally it was sitting in the center. If I go to 02, notice that because it's not been updated on that one, it sits a little bit off center, which is great because it gives us a nice way to actually look at it and work with it when we're moving along. The next option is we've got the item that we need, we've got the item that we want, we've done our changes to it. So we've modified the geometry of the part to give it 3 different variations. And let's say perhaps this is something we work with on a daily basis, and we need to actually go in and change, change sizes, but we don't want to go in and draw it up all the time. So fortunately, with Inventor, we can create this custom content center, which is what we're going to do now. For us to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the editor just to show you what's in here. Now, if I look at what's going on in the editor, I've got a really nice little function here and feature that I can go into. And if I look at the library view, this is my BB part library, which I've created earlier on. And I could go and browse up to all the different libraries that's available to me. So I can go to Inventor ISO and notice that I've got all the different options here. Now, because I'm in the editor, it grays out for me, right? So let me close that. And if I open up an assembly file, perhaps, if I play some Content Center, notice that in my ISO tab, I've got all of the components that I can work with. Now, this makes life a lot easier for me when I'm working with it. Now, just to go over what the Content Center is going to do for me, if I click on components, notice that I've got subfolders and folders that live inside of it. And in here, I've got access to all of my library components. Now, this can be a single file with multiple variations of the screw, for instance. Now, let's get back into the part. And I'm going to go into the editor again. And what we do is, for us to go in and actually create a library file for us, we can go in and copy the, so if I go back to ISO, sorry, I could go in and copy the structure of other parts, for instance, to my custom content center file, my BB library file. There's multiple things you can do. You could also do a material guide, so different components would have materials assigned to it, and you could have a much more, much more done to it from the family side of it. In purpose of the webinar, we're going to look at just looking at the features that we have here. So in here, you can go in and create a folder if you need, and it will fall into a subfolder. And if you create a folder, you'll find that inside here, I've already got a slider that I've done before that's created inside here. I could go and create a subfolder under features here. And when you do that, it's a category folder that you could name, and there's images that you can apply to it, so it looks a lot more like what you're going to be working off. So it makes it easier, and your content center looks a lot neater. Okay, so let's go into publishing a part now. If I go into the content center menu and on the ribbon under the Manage tab, notice that we've got in here, we can publish features. Okay, so if it's just a feature that we want to publish off a component, it could be an extrusion or a hole or a complex shape that we've either swept or we've done extrusion out of, we can publish that feature only. Alternatively, we can publish the part. So you can publish parts and iParts to the Content Center. If I click on Publish Part, I've got the option to select which library I want to publish it to. I go into Next. Again, in here, under Features, I can go into my slider option, and I can go in Next. Okay. Next is the family mapping columns, that property mapping that you could have, and here you could assign different mappings to the part. In this example, we're going to go to Next. And what we can do here is, under the Publish Guide, some of the family key columns that we want to come across. Now, whatever we select in here will be available to us when we call up the part in an assembly. So let's call in length, and we're going to go Next. So under the family description, it's going to go under the family name BB Slider. Family description, you could add in a description here. Purchased, okay. You could also say it fits in the folder name of BB Slider. The organization, you can go and pick up from here, a standard. And the manufacturer, we could add in a manufacturer down there as well. Again, the standards that it's going to abide by, as well as any revisions of that standard that's going to be in there. We go to Next. Notice that it loads a thumbnail image of what we have on screen here, so it makes it easy for us to recognize or identify our component that we're publishing. And also, this is where the BMP image of what we're publishing is located. If I select Publish, I get a message saying the part is published successfully, and I go OK. Now, all looks well, but it's sitting inside of my part file at the moment. If I'm going to go into an assembly, create an assembly, I could go in now and place a component from my Content Center. Excuse me. I go into the slider. Notice that I've got my two sliders in here. Firstly, if I place the slider down, I've got the option to choose the size that I'm going to work with, or I could place it as a standard or a custom. If I OK that, and let's place grounded origin point. If I reorientate the model, escape that, this is my Content Center that I've just published. Now, I could go in and change the size from the right-click menu to something bigger. And notice that if I choose the 15, the whole is just as my iPart. Now, what's great about this is using this method is once you publish a component, you can always call it in, share that file to an external party, and they would have access to your Content Centers, which makes life quite easy and a lot more efficient. You become a lot more efficient because you're not constantly drawing this file up or copying it in from a separate location to use in your assembly, which could have issues later on with links and file associativities and resolve issues. So using a Content Center for components that you work off, custom Content Center becomes very beneficial when using Inventor. Okay, so that takes us through using a Content Center inside of Inventor, just using the standard, creating above our standard Content Center, so creating a custom Content Center to place into assemblies. I could go in and again have a look at this component that's assembled to something. You could go in and you're able to actually change sizes, and you can have different options that you could work off. Now, in the next, let's go back to the PowerPoint. In the next webinar, we're going to be looking at creating custom Content Center Part 2. This would be looking at working off Content Center for your frames. So we'll take a look at the steps that we're going to use to how we create custom components for Frame Generator. And you'll find that I've created some Frame Generator components that can be used for structural items or structural components, which is South African standard. And I'll take you through steps that we can on how we create content center for you. I'm going to jump into questions. So any questions that we have in here, please let me know, and we can answer them now for you. Alternatively, you can give me a shout or at Baker Baines, or you could give me pop me an email at Daniel, DANEEL @bakerbaines.com, and I'll be glad to answer them and assist you with any questions that you have. So I'm going to leave the floor open for some questions. If you have any questions, please use the type box and type them in. Alternatively, you could raise your hand and we could go through any questions that you have. Thanks, Jeff. There's no questions from your side. Anyone else? A couple of minutes more. And if there's something that comes to mind later on, please feel free to give me a shout or pop me an email. I'll be more than happy to assist you with any questions that you have. So Kubus has got a question with regards to when publishing parts to the content center, different types, i.e. bolts, nuts, structural parts, etc. They have different metadata that is required during the process. Where do one get the breakdown of what is needed and how is it used? The help file is not very helpful. Okay, so Kubus, I think the question that's more around, if I understand it correctly, is it more around the metadata of the component that you want to create and publish to the content center, or is it the steps or the process of publishing it using that metadata? So the data required. So the data required would be you get that information from either suppliers of the components. So to create a South African content, I use the red standard books for components like bolts that will need clamp length. So that would come from the manufacturers that will give you the component lengths and details. And what you would do is you'd create an iPart for different lengths, and then you can use that to publish for your custom content center. Okay, so the specific info, maybe we can pick that up afterward. Afterward, maybe we can have a little a conference call or perhaps a chat afterward, and I can actually have a look and see where you're going wrong and how we can assist you with that. Okay, Kobus? Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Vaynant, thank you for the question. Yes, we can pick that up afterward with regards to the naming convention for the content center. We can have a discussion around it. I see you available next week, so we can do that next week when you're available, and we can have a chat around going through it. If there's any other questions, please let me know. Email me or give me a call, and we can go through it. Kobus, if you could perhaps give me a copy an email with your contact details afterward, we can have a chat regarding the questions that you had. Thank you very much for attending. I hope it was insightful and helpful. Just a quick introduction on how to create Content Center. Please look out for the next webinar. We'll be creating Content Center for publishing to the frame generator. Thank you very much. Have a great day and a great weekend ahead of you. Thank you.